the whispering walls. I always prided myself on finding unique Airbnb stays. The more offbeat and unusual, the better. So when I stumbled upon the enchanted cottage in a remote mountain town, it seemed perfect. The listing promised charming old-world architecture, spectacular views, and a place where time stands still. The host, Sylvia, had a perfect 5-star rating with dozens of glowing reviews. Guests praised the cottage's tranquility and how refreshed they felt after staying there. The price was steep, but I figured the peace and quiet would be worth it. I booked 3 nights. I didn't know then that the cottage would almost cost me my life. The drive up the winding mountain roads was picturesque, with the forest canopy glowing orange and red from the autumn leaves. When I arrived at the cottage, it was just as advertised, a quaint stone structure nestled in a clearing, with ivy creeping up the walls and a wooden swing swaying gently in the breeze. Sylvia wasn't there to greet me, but she left a note on the dining table. "Welcome, Isla. Make yourself at home. Please respect the cottage's history. Some things here are very old. You'll find the keys in the blue jar by the fireplace. Enjoy your stay." Sylvia. I explored the cottage, marveling at its rustic charm. The furniture looked antique, the walls were adorned with faded portraits, and the wooden floors creaked underfoot. But there was something odd about the place, an oppressive stillness, as if the walls were holding their breath. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard a faint whisper. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the sound was too deliberate, too human. It came from the walls, like someone speaking softly just on the other side. I sat up, straining to listen. The words were muffled, impossible to make out, but the tone was unmistakable, pleading, desperate. I turned on the lights and checked every corner of the room. Nothing. Telling myself it was just the old house settling, I crawled back under the covers and eventually fell asleep. The next morning, I noticed a door I hadn't seen before. It was in the hallway, small and unassuming, but locked. I tried the keys Sylvia had left, but none of them worked. Curious, I texted her, "Hey, just wondering, what's behind the locked door in the hallway?" Her reply came hours later. "Storage. Please don't try to open it. It's best left alone." That only made me more curious. As the day went on, the whispers returned. They followed me everywhere, in the kitchen, the living room, even outside on the porch. Always faint, just barely audible. I began to notice other strange things. The portraits on the walls seemed to shift slightly when I wasn't looking. A chair I'd moved in the living room was back in its original position when I returned. And then there was the mirror in the bathroom. When I looked into it, my reflection seemed off. The expression wasn't quite mine, the smile lingering just a second too long. That evening, I decided to search the cottage for answers. In the bedroom closet, I found an old wooden chest. Inside was a leather-bound journal, the pages yellowed and brittle with age. The entries were written in messy, frantic handwriting. The voices are getting louder. They call my name, beg me to listen. I tried to leave, but the house won't let me. Another entry read. I opened the door. I shouldn't have. God help me, I shouldn't have. The final entry was incomplete, the words scrawled across the page in a shaky hand. It's in the walls. Watching. Waiting. The entry ended there, the ink trailing off. That night, the whispers grew louder. They weren't just coming from the walls anymore. They were in the room with me. I sat on the bed, clutching my phone, my heart pounding. The air felt heavy, suffocating. And then I heard it, a single clear word. Isla. I bolted out of the bedroom, only to find the door to the hallway ajar. The locked door at the end was wide open. Against every instinct, I approached the open door. Beyond it was a small, dark room, empty except for a single chair in the center. The walls were covered in scratch marks, as if someone had tried to claw their way out. On the floor was a pile of photographs. They were of me, walking through the forest, sitting in the living room, sleeping in the bed. I stumbled back, my breathing ragged, and that's when I felt it, a hand on my shoulder. I turned, but no one was there. The whispers were deafening now, a cacophony of voices screaming, pleading, and laughing. I ran for the door, but it slammed shut in front of me. The room seemed to close in, the walls pulsing like a living thing. Isla, the voices hissed. Stay with us. I don't remember how I got out. The next thing I knew, I was in my car, speeding down the mountain road. When I got home, I tried to report the cottage, but the listing had disappeared. Sylvia's profile was gone, as if it had never existed. Then, 3 days later, I found something in my bag that I hadn't packed. A photograph of me standing in the doorway of the locked room, a vacant smile on my face. In the corner of the photo was a shadowy figure, its hand resting on my shoulder. Beneath the photo, scrawled in Sylvia's handwriting, were the words, "Room available for one more." The Forgotten Cabin. I never intended to stay at that Airbnb. My plan was simple: drive through the countryside, take some photos for my portfolio, and head home the same day. But a sudden storm changed everything. Heavy rain turned the winding backroads into rivers of mud, and when my car skidded off into a ditch, I had no choice but to find shelter. My phone barely had signal, but I managed to pull up an Airbnb listing for a nearby cabin. Rustic getaway in the heart of the forest, perfect for nature lovers. The listing had no reviews, but it was cheap, close by, and available for an immediate check-in. Desperate and drenched, I booked it without a second thought. The directions led me deep into the woods. The trees were so dense that the GPS lost signal halfway there, but eventually, I found it. A weathered two-story cabin with a sagging porch and boarded-up windows. It didn't look like the photos, but I told myself it was just the rain making everything seem worse. The door was unlocked. Inside, the cabin was dark, musty, and filled with mismatched furniture that looked like it had been salvaged from a yard sale. A note on the kitchen table read, "Welcome. Feel free to explore. Please don't enter the basement. Enjoy your stay. Harper." The storm raged on outside, so I had no choice but to stay. I found some candles in a drawer, lit them, and settled into the couch with a blanket. That's when I noticed the smell. It was faint at first, like damp earth, but it grew stronger as the night wore on. A sickly sweet odor that seemed to come from somewhere below. By morning, the storm had calmed, but the woods were shrouded in a thick fog. I checked my car, but it was still stuck in the ditch. I had no choice but to wait for a tow truck, though I could barely get a signal to call for one. With nothing else to do, I explored the cabin. Most of the rooms were unremarkable, dusty and filled with cobwebs, but at the end of the hall, I found a locked door. It was heavy, made of thick wood, with a rusted padlock keeping it shut. A cold draft seeped through the crack beneath it, carrying that same sickly odor. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was behind it. That night I heard it. At first it sounded like scratching, soft and faint, coming from the locked door. Then came the whispers. They were low and garbled, as if multiple voices were speaking at once. I couldn't make out the words, but they filled the cabin, echoing off the walls. I stayed in bed, clutching the blankets, praying for morning. But the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Around midnight, they stopped abruptly, replaced by a new sound: footsteps. They started upstairs, heavy and deliberate, moving toward the staircase. I grabbed my phone, dialing the emergency number, but the call wouldn't go through. The footsteps stopped just outside my bedroom door. By morning, the cabin was eerily silent. I decided I couldn't stay another night. I'd walk to the nearest town if I had to. But as I packed my bag, I noticed something odd: a trapdoor in the kitchen floor. It was partially hidden beneath a threadbare rug, the edges barely visible. I wouldn't have seen it if not for the way the rug had shifted during the night. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. Pulling the rug aside, I saw that the trapdoor was unlocked. A staircase led down into darkness. Against every instinct, I descended into the basement. The smell hit me first, overpowering and nauseating. The walls were lined with shelves, each one cluttered with strange objects: old photographs, rusted tools, and what looked like animal bones. In the center of the room was a circle of candles, their flames flickering weakly despite the lack of a breeze. And then I saw it, a table covered in Polaroids. The photos showed previous guests, smiling, laughing, posing in the cabin. But as I flipped through them, the images changed. In the later photos, the guests looked terrified, their smiles replaced by wide-eyed fear. In the final pictures, they weren't alone. A figure stood behind them, its face obscured by shadows, its hand resting on their shoulders. I turned to run, but I tripped over something: a suitcase. Opening it, I found clothes, a phone, and a driver's license. The name on it wasn't mine. It belonged to someone who'd disappeared months ago. As I scrambled back up the stairs, the front door creaked open. A woman stepped inside, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes hollow. She wore a long black coat, and her hands were streaked with dirt. "Leaving so soon?" she asked, her voice unnervingly calm. I couldn't speak. She stepped closer, her gaze locking onto mine. "You weren't supposed to see that." I bolted for the door, but she was faster, slamming it shut and turning the lock. "You're part of the house now," she whispered. I don't know how I managed to get away. One moment, she was lunging toward me, and the next, I was outside, running through the woods. When I finally reached the main road, I flagged down a passing car. The driver, an older man, looked at me with concern as I explained what had happened. "You must be mistaken," he said. "That cabin's been abandoned for years. No one's lived there since the Harper family disappeared." When I got home, I tried to put the experience behind me. But 2 days later, I received a message from Airbnb. "Thank you for your stay at the Forgotten Cabin. We hope to host you again soon." Attached was a photo of me standing in the basement, staring at the table of Polaroids. In the shadows behind me, the figure was watching,